Okay, we need to back up a page. You got your Bibles open to James chapter 3. I want you to turn to James chapter 1. James chapter 1 that we already studied, just reminding ourselves of verse 26. Verse 26 reads, "If anyone among you thinks he is religious and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his own heart, this one's religion is useless." Now, I've asked you this in other classes. Are you religious? Yes, you are. There's vain religions that are out there. Your religion can be vain, so you're religious. My question is your religious vain? And if you say yes, you're in trouble. Okay? Now, the reason I say that is because this verse is telling us, and we've already studied it, how important it is for us to control our tongue. That there's no excuse for having a bad tongue. Having said that, we get over to the third chapter, and when you read these first 12 verses, it almost gives you what impression about the tongue? Okay?
It's the most powerful muscle in the body.
Okay, but what does it tell you? It almost gives you an impression about the tongue. Yeah, that you can't control it. Doesn't it? I mean, it's almost like we've got, there's the permission. Right there. Oh, no man can tame that tongue. Oh, wait a minute. James chapter 1 says, you don't bridle your tongue. He comes around and says, your religion's vain. And if your religion's vain, what hope do you have of heaven? You don't have any hope. And so let's not go into this passage again like we started last week by saying to ourselves, well, I just have a loose tongue. It's not my fault, or I just naturally talk like that. That's just a habit I've got. Everybody's got their vices, and it seems like we all have it. Well, let's get back here. All right, let's remind ourselves what we were reading last week. In verse 2, it said, I'll read verse 1 since we talked about it. "My brethren, let not many of you become teachers, knowing that you shall receive a stricter judgment." We had a good discussion on that. "For we all stumble in many things. If anyone does not stumble in word, he is a perfect man, able to bridle his own body." Was that sarcasm? Do you think that's sarcasm? Oh, if anybody's a perfect man, he's able to bridle his tongue, because nobody can do that. No, it's not sarcasm, folks. It's a fact. Like we read in chapter 1, you don't bridle your tongue. Now, we're going to get into this in just a few moments, but I don't know if we have any horse riders here. But what does a bridle do?
It's like a rudder. It steers them.
Yeah, it steers it, right? I mean, it controls. And you get that thing in the mouth, and when the horse is not doing what it should be doing, what do? Pull back on that. Why do you pull back on that? Yeah, because it hurts the horse. It reminds them, you don't do that. And so this whole idea that he mentions here, that he is a perfect man or a complete man, which we are supposed to be, which I'm going to be preaching on this morning, able also to bridle the whole body. And that's important for us to keep in mind in all of this. Indeed, we put bits in a horse's mouth that they may obey us, and they turn their whole body. Look also at the ship, although they are so large and are driven by fierce winds, they turn by a very small rudder everywhere the pilot desires. Even so, the tongue is a little member and boasts great things. See how great a force a little fire kindles. The tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. The tongue is so set among our members that it defiles the whole body. It sets on fire the course of nature, and is set on fire by hell. For every kind of beast and bird and reptile and creature of the sea is tamed and has been tamed by mankind, but no one can tame the tongue. It is unruly evil, full of deadly poison. With it we bless our God and Father, and with it we curse men, who have been made in the similitude of God. Out of the same mouth proceeds blessings and cursings. My brethren, these things ought not to be so. Does a spring send forth fresh water and bitter from the same opening? Can a fig tree, my brethren, bear olive, or a grapevine bear figs? Thus no spring yields both salt water and fresh. All right, now, you've already made a couple of comments, but when we read through that again, what's the great lesson about the tongue that we really want to learn? I mean, the overriding theme of this, those verses.
Watch what you say.
Watch what you say. Control what you say. Think about what you say. Think about the dangers. Think about the sin that is caused because of the tongue. Don't take it lightly is the point. And so when I stop and think about all of this, and when we stop and think about this, I want our lesson not to be just educational as far as knowing what the verses are saying there. It's easy to do that, but we have to make application. And if we're going to learn anything, obviously because of the dangers of the tongue and what it can do to us, let's do some examination in our lives of what causes this. What causes the tongue to be full of evil? What causes the tongue to be so destructive? Let's get to the root of the matter, okay? I mean, obviously, the things that we say stem from things. Such as what?
Anger.
Anger. Like, what else? What's that?
Whatever's in your heart.
Okay, yeah, that's right. Whatever's in your heart. So we're describing right now, Kevin, what are some of those things in your heart?
Lack of maturity.
Okay. Maturity. Jealousy. Oh man, that's okay. And bitter. Oh wow. Bitterness. Let's throw in here envy. How about low self-esteem, right? Because, we say things and we try to justify it by saying, I didn't mean to be hateful towards that person, but everything seems to fall into his place. That envy, that jealousy. Egypt.
I have a dumb question. Reading through all of this now, understand where I'm coming from. You got people out there that can I'll say smirk haters, and they say something to you or say something about you, but then you hear it, but then you want to say something back, and they can't stand you because you might be of a different race or something like that, and the world is full of that.
Okay. I'm going to put vindictive. Okay, I'm going to put that back there too. So there's a lot of reasons why we would say certain things. We want to respond to somebody. Somebody speaks evil about us. We want to speak evil about them. We think about sarcasm. I mean, sarcasm, the things that we can do with the tongue, which makes it so dangerous, because I've said before, you could say something to somebody. I could go up to, I could go up to Steve. Well, that's a nice shirt you got on. Now, if he got mad at me for saying that, could I not come back and say, didn't I say you had a nice shirt? Did I? But what could he say?
It's the way
you said it. See, it's not only what you say, it's how you say it. And remember, what we're talking about here is we're not talking about not saying anything. How many of us grew up with, if you can't say anything good, don't say anything at all? Okay? All right. Now, if you grow up with that, and everybody comes in here and lives by that rule and decides, I'm not going to say anything to anybody. Nobody speaks to one another. What's everybody thinking?
Something bad.
Yeah, something bad. Why aren't you talking to me? So in other words, not saying anything at all, ever. Not complimenting, right? Not being thankful. Not being interested in somebody else's life. Taking an interest in somebody else's life. So when we talk about the power of the tongue here, let's get to the root of it, because a lot of times we will justify and not think about what comes out of our mouth. But I'm going to tell you, when you start examining it, we can control that. That's what he's talking about. He wants us to control the tongue and be beneficial to serving God, because this instrument here, this small instrument that he describes here, can cause us to stumble in so many ways. Matt.
One thing that I think we left off there that I think a lot of that falls under is patience. A lack of patience, like your patience gets tried, that contributes to quick response to anger, quick response to lack of maturity. A lot of those things kind of fall under that overarching umbrella.
I think you're spot on, because what did you have in James chapter 1 again? Let every one of you be what? Swift to hear, slow to speak, right? So you're back to that, Matt. The person that's swift to speak, he's going to get himself in trouble, right? So he's not patient. Sometimes, and you remember the proverb, we went through Proverbs recently, a guy that speaks of something before he hears the whole matter, he's not wise. And sometimes people get half the information and end up, apologizing. Oh, I misunderstood. Oh, I didn't get all the facts about that. Gets half of it. And so it can get you in all kinds of trouble. So being a good listener. So we could say, put that in there, lack of listening. But the patience that Matt brought in there, boy, when you start examining all this, now we know exactly why. I mean, have you ever uttered, I don't know why I said that? Did you ever say that? I don't know why I said that. But is there an answer? I mean, you can say, I don't know why I said that, but when you stop and think about it, you know exactly why you said it. Maybe I didn't stop and think. Okay, I wanted to be, they hurt me. I wanted to hurt them right back. I was jealous, envious. I'm hateful because, well, boy, when you're full of hate, you're not saying nice things. What's the root of gossip? Right? We're talking about some of that stuff, right? And wanting to we can put that one, puff ourselves up. The dangers of the tongue, and again, we talked about that recently in our Proverbs study and Ecclesiastes study. We were talking about who should praise you? Where should the praise come from? Somebody else, not our own lips, right? Again, the dangers of the tongue, right? So many things that we're talking about here. We're all affected by this. So every one of us here are wanting to heed the warning that James is setting forth here, wanting us to see about the tongue, how small it is. Verse 4, like the rudder of the ship is so small. Verse 5, even so the tongue is a little member and boasts of great things. Every forest fire started by a spark. Janet.
And I know we're talking about the tongue, but I think a lot of times our actions speak louder than our words. I mean, I think you can just almost put them in the same category. Even though you're not saying anything, but your body language, you're saying a lot without saying anything.
And that's why I said earlier, by not saying anything. Yeah. Your tongue can get you into trouble by not saying things. The lepers, the 10 lepers got in trouble because of what? 9 of them got in trouble what? They didn't come back and praise him. They didn't come back and acknowledge, right? It's you just don't want to walk away and think nice things. Think thankfulness. How about literally following through with it? It's like a little child. What do you say? And you're trying to teach the children to be thankful. What do you say? What do you do when the child goes, well, I was thinking thankfulness? Well, that's not going to cut it, right? And so you really want them to get into the habit of having good speech. Paul used that with the Ephesians brethren, right? That filthy speech, that filthy language. And so, with all of this, and we're not through this text yet, I would like for us to think in terms of how do you cure it? I mean, we all know people, maybe we found ourselves not controlling this. So, knowing the root of the problem, so what are some things that you can put into place to control that? And I'll tell you what, I'll let you mull on that for a little while till we finish this through verse 12. And then when we're finished going through those verses, I want you to be coming back and giving some practical, useful tools that we can all implement to use our tongue better. Okay? I mean, unless you've all mastered it, but I'm just saying, is there room for growth for all of us in this area? Of course. Of course, we can say that without a doubt. So let me just get back here to see again what James, I know that you know this, but again, he's driving home about how great of danger, verse 5, of the problems that can be created by a little spark, verse 6. The tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity, sinfulness. We often talk about our actions, right? And the things that we do and the things that we don't do. So much of it centers around the tongue. And obviously, guys, when we're talking about the tongue, does the tongue do something without thinking about it? I guess that's a trick question. I guess it's a yes and a no, isn't it? You've said some things without thinking it through, right? But this gets back to what Kevin mentioned earlier. Out of the heart. Okay? When you get into those arguments and you say something you shouldn't have said, the person you said it to is thinking, oh, so that's really what you think. Really? I mean, that's what comes out. So we've got to control that. AJ?
What about the other two little members?
because I have seen people walking down the street and they can roll their eyes and turn up their nose and they say something else. Sometimes you can hear it, sometimes you don't.
It's all part of it. Yeah, it's all part of it. That and then like what Janet was talking about there. It's the body language.
Okay.
And even with a little child, we're really wanting them to really be thankful, other than just say the word.
Okay, what about when I know this is going to happen. There's certain cliques with it. And every time you turn around and talk about people cussing and where somebody can hear it. But then if they move away to somebody who has a large mind, small minds are trouble. That much I know. Large minds mostly come from the Bible, and they're not thinking about it. They're thinking about different things, and that's why trouble are not keeping trouble.
Well, one thing we're learning about in all of this, EJ, is that I can only control self, right? We witness all kinds of unruliness with the tongue.
That's why if you move away from A and go to B or C, you have better luck because B and C don't cuss, and A does.
Well, you're getting back to what we're going to talk about in a moment as far as cures. Okay, right? You're talking about a cure. So you remove yourself from that situation. Let's face it, a person who likes to gossip, and I used this a couple of weeks ago, remember? A person who comes up to you and says, you're not going to, I shouldn't tell you this, but, and as soon as they start saying that about somebody, you go, wait, and call them. What are you doing? Oh, I'm calling them to verify what you're saying about them. No. Are they going to tell you anything in the future? No. See, when you nip things, okay, and we're going to talk about that in just a few moments. Bernice, you had your hand up a moment ago.
I was going to say, I have actually met a lot of people that are proud of how well they can hurt people with their tongue.
Yes. And you're right. I mean, people can be praised for it, for hateful things, and be good at it. Just a natural thing. And it's true. I think one of the most commonly used things, and it was in our family, and we tried it. Sarcasm is so easy. Because the problem with sarcasm, it's belittling, right? It's to embarrass. It's to hurt. Now, again, being mindful of all that, he says here in verse 7, for every kind of beast and bird and reptile and creature of the sea is tamed and has been tamed by mankind, but no man can tame the tongue. It's unruly, evil, full of deadly poison. Now, be careful what you read into that verse. If you read that verse literally, what's it saying? If you want to take it face value.
You can't control it.
Yeah, forget it. Why are we even talking about this? Why are we even wasting our time about this? Basically, what it's saying is you just have to get in the mindset of just praying for forgiveness all the time because you're not going to change. No, he's wanting us to see how bad it is. It's stressing it is what it's doing. It's stressing how dangerous it is and what a powerful tool it is. And people go to great lengths to try to tame an animal. And how easy is it to tame an animal? Does it take time and effort? Okay. So if it takes time and effort in planning to train an animal to do something, how much more our own tongue? It's going to take time and effort to train it. And you want to train, and I've had people, and I've used it. I think, just as an example. A person that really has a hard time with somebody, struggles with this. Oh, we didn't even put this up here. Not just anger, but hate. Okay? You struggle with hate with somebody. You want to know a good cure? Go up to that person and compliment them. Compliment that person often. See, what you're doing is you're retraining yourself. You're retraining yourself. You're the mindset that is there. And it's not only good therapy, by the way, because walking away with anger in your heart only does what? Makes you bitter. Yeah, it makes you bitter. And somebody mentioned that earlier, right? That bitterness that is in there. You don't want that. And if we're going to become the loving and godly people that God wants us to be, it becomes so apparent by how we speak. The follower of Jesus, remember when he denied the Lord? Remember, it was like, your speech betrays you. Don't you want your speech to betray you? In other words, in the sense where I don't want you to pretend to be worldly, and they're going, I haven't heard you cuss. You're really a good person. You know, you don't want to apologize for that. So it's a bad analogy that you want to fit in with the world. But the point is, shouldn't our speech tell us a lot about ourselves? I'm going to tell you guys, when you're around somebody, your speech tells you or tells other people what you think about your wife, your children, your brothers and sisters, the church as a whole. It doesn't take long. Your kids have ears. They're listening. Misty?
I think it goes back to your thing myself too. Mankind can tame other animals. We can't tame the speech of somebody else. So you really have to focus on that with your kids, talking about what message are you communicating, not the words that you use, but what message are you communicating. It's
true. It really is. I don't know if we give it enough thought every day because we speak all the time. Right? All day long. You guys, you talk all the time. But to examine ourselves, and that was a good point, Miss, I appreciate that. Remember, you're going to be around people, you can't control what they do. But you might have an influence on them. You may have a good influence on them by the way you speak. And we need to be mindful of that. Dave?
Sometimes it's helpful to use key words, like, for instance, if somebody condescends on you or being hateful, say, good night. You know, the words that you think, and you don't want to use any worldly language, so key words like, good night.
Well, yeah, I was trying to think of an analogy to tie that into, but I think you and I, when we train ourselves to be, when you start controlling this, Philippians 4, right? Let this mind be in you. I mean, of course, that was in Philippians chapter 2, but he went on to talk about the kind of things that we think about, things that are pure and holy. And so that's why when you guys are home by yourself or something, and you're working at home, and you hit your thumb with a hammer, and boy, does it hurt. What's the first word that comes out of your mouth?
Ouch.
Ouch. Me? It's not out. It's stupid. Stupid. I'm stupid. Right? Stupid. You know, I hit my thumb. But no, the first word is, we don't have a cuss word coming out of our mouth. You know, we're very conscious of it, right? So you've trained yourself. So if you can train yourself in certain areas, you know, you've trained yourself to talk around children in a certain way. You've done it. Grandkids, you've trained yourself. And so you can do that, then take it to the next level. And just keep constantly training yourself. We never stop learning is the point. And that's the thing that I want us to see, especially as we get older even. You know, you don't make allowances for somebody who's, you know, when I get in my 80s, it's not now that I'm allowed to be a grumpy old man. No, there's no excuse for that. Your aches and your pains, you know, we didn't even put be a complainer. You know, just constant complaining about things. Again, being a downer. Do you know those kind of people? It's just always negative. We didn't put that up there either. Just negative. You know, they're the ones I told you. They get in the car. You're not going that way, are you? Oh, I'm sorry. Which way you want to go? I don't know. They just don't want to say. They don't want to be supportive. Is the point, Nancy?
And sometimes we have to think too. Sometimes somebody will be cussing, and then they'll turn around, look at you, and say, "Oh, I'm sorry." We used to say, "Well, that's okay," but not. You just say, "Well, thank you," to let them know that they noticed that you didn't really appreciate them cussing.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's a way that you show your influence, and you just acknowledge and move on, and you can come up with a million scenarios with that. But again, we're just trying to get to the root of the matter, and as we're also implementing as we go through this, some of the cures. That guys, we have to be thinking about this stuff. We just don't want to. I hope we don't come every Sunday and every Wednesday, and when you even have your own personal studies, that we're just not studying like we're studying for a test. We're studying to change our lives. We are evolving. We are growing. We are Christians that have improved. You know, I like to think that, you know, I've been here 11 years. I'd like to think that there's been some improvement. I'd like to think that, okay, that there's been some improvement. But since I became a Christian, I'd like to think there's been some improvement in my speech. And all of us, hopefully, are thinking along those very lines. Verse 9. With it we bless our God and Father, and with it we curse men who have been made in the similitude of God. He's not saying everybody does this, but he's showing us that when you do this, it doesn't even make any sense. What do you call a person who does that? Double tongue or a hypocrite. It's a hypocrite. One moment you're saying this, and might get back to what EJ's talking about. In a certain surroundings, you'll talk like this, and other surroundings, you'll talk like this. And that's what I've often said. I've come home and told Debbie, some of the guys in the change room when we played hockey, I'll get on the ice, and the guy will come up to me and say, man, why do they talk like that? And I told him, I said, you know what? I can't believe that they talk like that around their children. And they may very well have, because the dad did. But the point is, I'm thinking, they might be doing that to impress. Right? You can put that on there too. People talk dirty, they talk bad to try to impress people. And that's ridiculous. But the point is, you and I are not like that. You and I are not wanting to be a hypocrite. We're not going to praise God 1 minute, come in here and sing these praises, bow our head in prayer and glorify our God, and get in the car and let our kids hear all the negative stuff out of our mouths. If you're not worried about your kids' future, right? If you're not worried about your kids' future, then don't give that a second thought. But if you are concerned, be mindful of that. And you can actually use that as a tool to try to help you. Oh yeah, I got to watch that. Yeah, right. I got to watch that. And again, I want to get back to some practical things here, because I think what just popped into my head when you're talking about cures is friends and family can really help you with this. Honey, don't say that. Okay. Don't call me honey, but I just say it in marriage. But the point is, she said, that wasn't nice. You're right. Last thing I wanted to hear when you say something like that is that wasn't nice. But I tell you what, if you constantly hear that isn't nice, you're going to stop doing it. I mean, you can help each other with our speech, is my point. That's really important. If we want a cure, do you want somebody to tell you? Let me ask you, do you want somebody to tell you when your speech is inappropriate? I wonder how many of us would get pride. You got to put that on there, right? Pride. Pride is like, I don't want anybody to correct me in my speech. I'm a Christian. And somebody is criticizing what I'm saying, and don't put that on them. Okay, so again, the inconsistencies out of the same oath proceeds blessings and cursings. My brethren, these things ought not to be so. So now I know what he said in verse 8 is not saying you can't tame it, because James comes right along and says, this shouldn't be so, brethren. Well, you just told me I can't help it. No. I'm saying for the most part, people don't control their tongue, is what I'm saying. It's full of deadly poison. That's what happens. It's common. They use that mouth for blessings and cursings. But brethren, these things ought not to be so. Could we miss heaven just because we didn't take thought to control our tongue? Seriously, brethren. Because when we're talking about the dangers of the tongue, let's not forget what we're talking about. Okay? Sin separates us from God. You can sit there and tell God how much you love Him, and then turn around and talk about how much you hate somebody. These things ought not to be so. Okay? Now, you can hate every false way. Right? You can hate sin. I'm going to tell you, if you don't control the tongue, there's no difference there. It's just hate coming out of there. Anger, whatever it might be. So, it's pretty serious stuff. The rhetorical, does a spring send forth fresh water and bitter from the same opening? No. Can a fig tree, my brethren, bear olives, or a grapevine bear figs? No. Thus, no spring yields both salt water and fresh. Okay, well, you guys have had time, and we've touched on 4 or 5 of them as we've gone through here, but we really need to make a list of things that we can implement to make sure, or to try to control the tongue. I'm going to what do they do to get a lion to jump up on a platform? What do they use?
Treats or
So they got a chair and what? A whip. Okay, so there's something that they're going to use to try to train. Okay, I mean others they have some food to throw out, right? Whatever it might be. So Nancy.
Well, isn't the mind? Isn't it really for controlling our mind?
Yeah.
Is what really controls the mind.
Yeah, but
no matter how you look at it.
Sure it is. I mean, but what we're talking about is okay. Now, what can I do to help control this? Well, first of all, we mentioned earlier, is that we need to study. All right, we need to get the good stuff in to get the garbage out. Right, so we got to get rid of that filthy mind. Okay, so we got to study and we got to ignore or avoid. Avoid what? Avoid that garbage, listening to garbage, because when you're around it all the time, you expose yourself to it. Are there any television shows? Don't want you to mention any because shouldn't even be watching them anyway. But it's a general question: do they use sarcasm? Of course they use it. The belittling. What are you going to say? Prayer. Oh, yes. Let's put that on there. You got to consciously pray about watching the words that we say. I already mentioned the help, the asking, or even appreciating. I asked you earlier if somebody were to come up to you and tell you, well, that was inappropriate. What usually happens though with this long list, because you said it and there was a reason why you said what you said, and somebody says, that was inappropriate. What are some consequences of hearing that? Now you're mad at them. Or, I'm done with you. I'm not talking to you anymore. Mallory?
Practicing. Because if you're in a bad habit, the only way to break that is to practice good habits. You have to just keep practicing. So whether that means, okay, I'm going to work and it causes me to think this way, I'm going to purposely practice before I get there what I'm going to say that I meet this person, what I'm going to say in this situation. A lot of times it's just practice repetition.
It is. And Paul gave us that advice, right? Paul said when he told them to don't steal anymore, what did he tell them? Go leave it with your hand. Okay, replace it. Okay, get into a good habit. Okay, so if you're used to saying this, start saying this, and you replace the bad with the good, and get into that habit over and over. They used to tell. I forget how many days it is. I read it in a book one time, but there's some truth to it. Because I know that when I removed my garbage can in my office, how long do you think it takes before I go, oh, I moved it over there? It's true. It's so many days before your brain goes, okay, it's not over there anymore. You moved it over there. And then it's automatic, right? And so there's going to be that process of some mistakes along the way, but you have to get into the habit of wanting to control the tongue. Nancy?
But you have to be consistent. Everything that you do that doesn't control is inconsistency. In this one, you have to be consistent. Doing the same thing over.
All right. What else, guys? We want to control, Mary.
My mother used to tell me count to 10, which I think feeds into the patience. I think it was Matt mentioned earlier that be slow to speak. Wait and think about engage your mind instead of just reacting.
It's true. When I was a younger man, as a younger preacher, when I got into controversy with somebody, I would get really, my heart would start to pound. And when the computers came out, I would get these horrible emails from people that either read the newspaper article. I mean, they're just lambasting me. And man, I'm just fired up. But you know what? You type it, you walk away, you come back and go, yikes, thanks. delete. Because you went back and I read that. I'm like, man, that wasn't even nice. You're not trying to help the person see. You're trying to belittle them. It's like some of the debates our brethren did in the past makes me ashamed because they weren't trying to defend the truth. They were trying to belittle the person and being hateful and hurtful. And yes, there's a lot of truth to just, okay, walk away for a like Mary's
Muzzle in
talking.
her mouth.
That's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. What else, guys? Because we want to control. We want to change. We want to be better. We want to be the kind of person that has good things come out of our mouth. Now, remember, good things are also rebukes. Let's not misunderstand that. I mean, constructive criticism. Obviously, when somebody said something wrong, you're criticizing that, right? And so we're not necessarily saying that all we're doing and going around is complimenting people all the time. No, we're talking about telling those things which are truthful. Let the truth come out of our mouths. Let's be kind. You know, a soft answer turns away wrath, right? So how you say something is taught over and over in the scriptures. So how you say something is going to relate to think about it, give it some thought, say the right thing. And we've often been in those situations, right, where you have to break some news to somebody and you're like, how do I do it? You want to give it some thought. I've written letters before and I've had to rewrite because you don't want the person to think that you're doing because you don't like them. Misty.
PJ mentioned it earlier, but sometimes you need to change your circumstances or your companions.
It's true. I mean, environment. And sometimes, guys, drastic change. Right? Sometimes drastic changes are necessary. And it happens. I'm trying to think. Maybe you guys can think of some drastic changes that might come into play. But sometimes, because of situations that you find yourself in, you have to remove yourself from that. And it could cost friendships. Matt?
But I've always kind of used the analogy of how do kids learn to talk. Like Sawyer isn't going to speak Spanish because Amy and I don't speak Spanish. So you learn what you're around. And I can think back when I first went to college, there were words that the world would consider, not even really bad words. But if I heard somebody say it, it was a shock to me.
Right.
And I can remember coming home from my first year of college and I had potty mouth. And I didn't think anything of it because I literally heard it every day, all day, 24/7 from everybody, in and around the dorms. And that was my environment to the point you heard it so much, you became callous to it, you became numb to it. And when you're in an environment, just like a kid, we speak English in our household. Sawyer's not going to learn Spanish. Even as adults, if we're around garbage and trash that people are saying people are doing, it's going to creep in. You can't expect to go somewhere every day, spend X amount of time there and not have some of it at least. See that maybe you don't say it, but you do become callous to it when you hear it. You don't have those same reactions that you do before.
We really have to work at that. You're right. Obviously, God doesn't want us to become monks. We're not going to go into a monastery. We're not going to cut ourselves off from the world. We're around it. But you're absolutely right, Matt. Yeah.
Well, I mean, and this was part of the reason why I quit my job was because of the environment and going in day after day after day and the hatred, the mouth, all that, and me dreading to go in. It's like,
you're right. There's a drastic measure. I mean, if it's going to suck the life out of you, all the negativity around you, life is, it can be so hard on you spiritually. It can be pulling you down, and you have to make those decisions because your ultimate goal is you want to go to heaven. I want to go to heaven, and I don't want this thing right here in the middle of my head to cause me to miss heaven. Obviously, if I implement these things, obviously you mentioned about the way we think, and we want to have those good minds. So let's not fill our minds full of junk. We don't want to read junk. We don't want to watch junk because you can become desensitized to, like Matt's spot on. I didn't leave home until I was 18 years old. And when I went away for 4 months and came back, I did not know my family was the cussingest family because when I was there, but when I came back and not around, I was in an environment of just Christians for 4 months. I come back and I'm like, oh, you got every other word. You guys are cussing all the time. Didn't realize it. All the time I was home, somebody would have asked me. And so sometimes that happens because I had a friend who said, hey, let's all go to this movie. I'll never forget. We were damn, we were just young guys. Wasn't married. A bunch of us went in there. We went to this movie. We walked out. He goes, man, I didn't realize all that language was in there. He says, it didn't stand out to him. But if you, being aware of this, it just stands out. And so, again, the cures are there, folks. The tools are there. God wants us to implement. Give it some thought. We need to be changing is the point. Be better. Well, I'm just not that kind of person. A Christian? That's the kind of person God wants you to be, the one that says, you know what? This tongue of mine, I'm going to use it for good and not for evil. I'm going to use it for good. And I want things to come out of my mouth that build and that are not destructive. I want to be constructive. And sometimes I have to rebuke. Sometimes you have to rebuke. We get that. That's not a bad thing. The whole point of this text is telling us that this tongue, you don't want to be sending out good and bad. Same time, right? It just can't be. It's being a hypocrite. And then we close by reminding ourselves, I've only got a couple minutes. We're going to get into this next section, Lord willing, next Sunday morning. And this ties into it, by the way, because this deals with wisdom that's from above and wisdom that's from below. And the wisdom that's from below is a lot of the things you guys listed here, by the way. That's the wisdom that's from below.
And that list, I mean, you expect it from the world, but you don't expect it from the people in the church.
Spot on. Glad you mentioned that, Jen. Yeah, and this gets back to what Matt was talking about. It's almost the norm. You know, you can actually be complimented for being full of bitterness and hate and envy if you have certain people on your side, right? You know, yeah, I like to hear that. Yeah, he is this, that, and the other. Yeah, you get supporters. You'll have supporters not doing this. You'll have supporters that try to encourage you to have the bad tongue. Right? And that's what makes it even harder. We didn't even bring that up. What makes it so difficult is you have people that are behind you and don't want you to change and want you to have the potty mouth, the gutter talk, and think like the world. We are to be different, especially when it comes to our tongue. We are a different people, and it should show. Our speech should betray us, folks, in that sense, that we're not conformed to this world. We often use that verse. Let's use it with the tongue. Let's not be conformed to this world, right? So let's be different in that way. Okay, so we're going to be talking about wisdom next week. Our time's about gone. I'm just going to stop it off there, and we'll pick up there in that section, Lord willing, next Sunday morning. And guys, I really appreciate all your comments this morning. So we'll just take a few minutes to get ready for worship.
What's up, Josh? Hey, how we doing? Good. What's up? I'm good. You've been busy, but I'm good. Staying busy. Yeah.